Hi, it's Elf again. Last time we talked about the world, but this time we'll talk about how you actually move through it. Because in virtual reality, locomotion can either feel magical or it can feel like you're about to puke. You see, in virtual reality, we had what's called motion sickness, also called cyber sickness or simulator sickness. It's kind of like seasickness or sickness from driving in a car. In virtual reality, it usually comes from a mismatch between your body and your brain. Your brain thinks you're moving because of what you're seeing, but your body isn't actually moving. And this confusion can cause intense nausea. Even though you yourself knows that you're just in a VR game, your brain is still confused. But how bad the nausea can be can also vary from person to person though. And just like sailors can grow a pair of sea legs, you can actually also reduce this VR sickness over time by playing more VR and grow a pair of VR legs. One of the problems with VR though is that it's still a fairly niche platform, and this sickness factor has the tendency to scare people off. So locomotion and movement in VR matters a lot. So motion sickness is one of the reasons I tried out a bunch of different movement systems throughout my masters. But it's not the only reason though. If you watched along in the last episode, you heard me mentioning my first semester project Hand Weaver's Horizon, which was a hand tracking game, which came with a big challenge. How do you move in a VR game when you don't have controllers and joysticks? So since the game worked on hand gestures, I came up with a system where if you made a pointing gesture by pointing your index finger forward, you would move forward. If you pointed your thumbs to either side, you would rotate in that direction. You could also point your thumb backwards and then you would move backwards. And honestly, it works surprisingly well. It got a lot of positive feedback. A lot of the reason were that it was very different. Nobody had really tried anything like that, and I haven't seen other games use that kind of movement system before. But I must admit I haven't tried a lot of VR hand tracking games before, so it could totally be out there. But of course it also had a bunch of issues. The biggest issue of course being motion sickness, since it didn't accommodate for that at all. But another big issue was fatigue. You had to hold up your arm for long periods of time, and this was very strenuous. Another complaint was that it felt kind of like driving a forklift by only being able to move forward or rotate. I later then made it possible for you to be able to do both at the same time by making like a finger gun gesture, but again it still didn't solve the problem completely. So the next semester I wanted to try a different approach. I tried out an arm swing in locomotion. That's why you move your arms up and down mimicking walking or running, and the faster you swing your arms, the faster you would move in the game. The cool thing about this locomotion type is that it can reduce the amount of motion sickness you get while still having smooth movement. This is because your brain recognizes the movement you're doing with your body and the movement you're seeing with your eyes. Of course it's not a complete fix. Some people still might get sick. It would probably help even more if you're mimicking walking in place with your legs as well. But right now most consumer-based VR headsets don't have trackers for your legs and feet. And it could cause other issues as well. It might prone people to walk in real life instead of walking in place, which can be dangerous if you think you're in another world. Trust me, I've seen a thing or two running a VR arcade. Arm swing locomotion can also be exhausting, but that can also be a good thing. In the second semester of my masters I made a VR exa game or exercise game, where the swing arm locomotion was the main game mechanic. The game was called Rift Runner, and you played as a scientist who by mistake opened a portal to another dimension. The other dimension then becomes fractured and unstable because of this, and you had to then run through a bunch of different dimensions to find your way back to your own dimension before they all collapse. I really liked the swing arm locomotion, but I also thought for my thesis project maybe it should be more a casual VR experience and not an exa game. So I wanted to take crack at the more classic VR locomotion systems, teleportation and smooth movement. I set teleportation as the default in the game, mostly because it avoids motion sickness a lot. You're not watching yourself slide through the space, you're basically just jumping from point to point. And also it makes you move fairly quickly through the world. Also it fed into this magical theme I had going. The way it works is that the player pushes forward the joystick on the left controller and the portal marker would appear. The portal would be animated similar to a spell, taking inspiration from anime and a witchy summoning ring. The player would then place the portal and then let go of the joystick and then instantly teleport to that spot. You can also rotate the portal while placing it to ensure which way you're facing when you teleport. This was indicated by an arrow, but I'm not sure I want to actually keep this functionality since it caused a lot of confusion during my testing. To be able to switch to a different locomotion, I added a wrist menu, which I designed to look like a magical scroll. You would open it up by pressing the small menu button on the left controller. And here you could toggle between the teleportation locomotion and the smooth locomotion. The smooth locomotion is as classic as it gets. One joystick to control your movement and another to control your rotation, just like most video games using a controller. But again, this smooth locomotion system doesn't really take motion sickness into account, and some people tend to get really sick from it. So I added what's called a tunneling effect. This is where your peripheral vision narrows every time you move in the game. This helps because you mostly see the horizon, which moves the least instead of the fast moving edges of your vision. But during testing, the only people that really wanted a smooth movement were the ones was already familiar with VR or played video games a lot, and they were kind of frustrated by this tunneling effect. So I quickly added a button where you could toggle this on and off, because comfort settings should definitely be the player's choice. So yeah, movement is a big part of the design. Different players need different options, especially if the game is meant to be accessible. And in the final version of this game, I'll definitely bring back the swing arm Locomotion as well. I really enjoyed that one. But yeah, what's your favorite movement style in VR? Teleport? Smooth? Maybe something completely different? Let me know in the comments. So yeah, that's it for this time, but next time we'll get more into the combat side of things. Portals, enemies, how spellcasting works, and much more. So yeah, stick with Elf for more chaos and pancakes.